Good evening, folks. Here's your first video. Since we're starting a new unit, we just had a test today, of course, and so we're going to start this new unit, and it's going to be more than one video. So I'm calling this Forces That Shape the Earth. This is Unit 6, and it's going to be the first section. Take a moment to pause this and write down the learning targets. Alright, so here we go. The composition of the Earth, or what is the Earth made of? And probably in middle school or grade school you learned that the Earth was made up of the crust, the mantle, the outer core, and the inner core. We're gonna stick with just the outer part of the Earth for right now in this unit. And instead of using the word crust, we're going to start off with the word lithosphere. The lithosphere is the crust of the Earth and the upper part of the mantle. It's the more solid part of the mantle, because the lower part of the mantle, actually the middle and lower part of the mantle, is molten rock. It's magma. So, but the upper part of the mantle and the crust is pretty much solid, and it's made of rock. The crust itself ranges from 0 to 100 kilometers thick. 0 being in the ocean, some of the parts of the ocean floor, and 100 kilometers thick would be some of the tallest mountain peaks in the world. So what are rocks? What's the crust made out of? They're made out of rocks. And while I didn't want to do a full-blown unit, I do want to briefly mention the 3 kinds of rocks, because one of them we're going to spend more time with. Igneous rocks, those are the rocks from when magma or lava cools. So it's basically they're formed from fire. Metamorphic rocks are any rocks that are placed under pressure inside the earth and a little bit or up to a moderate amount of heat. Now, not enough heat to melt it, but some moderate heat and some pressure over time slowly changes the mineral composition of that rock. Okay? And the one we're going to deal mostly with are sedimentary rocks. Sedimentary rocks are layers of rock formed from sediments of older rock. So let's figure out, how do we get these sediments? Okay, so sediments are basically just pieces of rock, and the pieces of rock are broken off of any kind of existing rock. So you can have sediments from igneous, metamorphic, or other sedimentary rocks. It's not important of which rock it comes from, but they're pieces. And the process of getting those rocks into small pieces or medium pieces or large pieces is called weathering. And there's basically 2 kinds of weathering. There is mechanical weathering, which is the weathering by the movement of something, and chemical weathering, which is kind of like the when water acts upon something, or acidic water or acid changes the chemical composition of the rock. We're mostly going to be dealing with mechanical weathering types. So there's 3 kinds of mechanical weathering. Ice wedging, which you may have learned as frost wedging. Abrasion, like sandpaper abrasion, except the abrasion in this case is going to be caused by water moving across rocks or wind moving across rocks. And then the third type is by the movement of glaciers. Glaciers are a very good weathering agent. So if you look at the picture in the upper right hand corner, I don't know where this is exactly, but you can definitely see that the most important, most visible characteristic of sedimentary rocks are that they're formed in layers. Well, let's look at chemical weathering. Chemical weathering, unlike mechanical weathering, not only does it make pieces, small pieces, but it also changes the chemical composition of the rock. So there's a chemical reaction involved. It's mostly done in water, by water in some way. The first 2 examples are by water. You know, water causes this process called hydrolysis, and that's basically the splitting of an object by the use of water. So certain rock types can actually be broken into pieces by chemicals that mix with the water and create chemical reactions. One such chemical is carbonic acid. It's a weak acid, and basically it's created naturally when raindrops fall through the air, through the carbon dioxide in the air, and mix with the CO2, and the CO2 dissolves in the water in the raindrops, and that creates acid rain. Acid rain is still a small problem, but it was a real big problem in the 80s in the United States. And then the third type of chemical weathering is oxidizing, or it's caused by oxygen. The best kind of oxidizing I can explain to you is rusting. So when a piece of iron, like an iron nail, it stays wet and exposed to oxygen. It turns that rusty color. That's called iron oxide. So there's certain kinds of rocks that contain iron mostly, that can be chemically weathered by oxidation. Oxidation, by the way, or oxidizing, is a very common chemical reaction that you'll learn about a couple of years in chemistry class. Okay, so how do you make sedimentary rocks? Well, it's a multi-step process, and your first step is weathering. Now, you've already talked about weathering. So weathering creates the sediments, and then what happens to the sediments? They have to be transported, and that transportation of sediments is called erosion. So sometimes people think erosion is the actual breaking up of the rock into sediments, but it's not. Weathering breaks up the rock. Erosion transports the sediments. Okay, so on this diagram, it's got both erosion and transport. I just want you to think of transport is erosion. Okay, the transport of sediments is called erosion. And the things that can transport these sediments are moving water, wind, and again, glaciers. Glaciers can push any size sediment from house-sized boulders down to grains of sand. Okay? Now, eventually, if it's the wind, the water, or the glacier, the sediments at some point will stop moving. The current in the stream or the river will stop flowing or slow down, and the sediments will fall to the bottom of the river, the lake, the ocean, or the wind dies down, and the wind can no longer carry the sand in the air, for example, and the sand falls to the earth. And over a many-year process, thousands of years, layer after layer after layer of sediment, kind of like the pages in this book, are laid down at the bottom of riverbeds or stream beds or oceans or on the ground. And as layers after layer after layer piles up on top of each other, then the weight of all the layers on top presses down over a long period of time and basically has this process called cementation. And it's not like somebody comes and pours concrete on it, but it cements the little pieces together, and it forms new sedimentary rock, and you see these nice layers. Okay, you can see these same kinds of layers as you drive home in the afternoon on the bus or in your mom or dad's car, on the road cut where they cut the road out 30 years ago. You can see different layers of different kinds of rocks. Okay, I hope this helps. Be sure you take good notes. Remember, I am checking notebook grades. I'll check it sometime right after midterm, and I'll be checking it again at the end of the 9 weeks before Christmas break. That's all. Have a good evening, folks.